Fab. So today for you all, I've got Christian Elliot, who is a husband and father of six homeschooled children. He's been full time in the alternative health space since 2005, logging over 20,000 hours of one-to-one coaching to do with fitness, nutrition, and relationship coaching. Christian is a co-owner of a newly established organization called Healing Limited. And Christian doesn't pull any punches, calling out the medical system, which I love. His main focus is on the creating of holistic and personalized detox programs to help people overcome a myriad of otherwise incurable diseases. So, welcome, Christian. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me, Emma. It's great to be here.
Fab. So, tell me how you got into all this holistic healthcare and
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my journey started probably like a lot of people. I was trying to solve my own problem. I was getting sick frequently. So I had some degenerative issues going on musculoskeletal, particularly in my shoulder. And I had just an immune system that was worn down from, in hindsight, really not knowing what I was doing, taking care of myself. I thought I was being healthy and thought I knew how to work out. And a lot of what I didn't know was biting me in the butt. So where I really started getting my health back, because I came across a chiropractor after about a half dozen medical doctors just couldn't do much for me. And he turned my paradigm of health upside down. He taught me about not just healing, but about structure and about alignment and about how the medical industrial complex works. He taught me how the food industrial complex works. And that, I guess you could call it awakening, led me to say, what else do I not know? Because if there's something this simple and profound, and my path to healing was a lot easier than, and no other doctor was able to figure this out, what else do I not know? And it really broadened my interest in trying to answer that question. So I became a curious student of other disciplines, and short version went on to get a nutrition certification. I got a personal training certification and various other ways I added credentials to my existence as a coach. So people started paying me kind of as a hobby first. And then when we added fitness to our offerings, it really became a business. So that gave us dependable revenue. And I wanted to have a holistic approach because I know how much it helped me. So we started adding other practitioners to our business. We had chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists, naturopathy, nutritionists, and some adjunct things that were just here and there. But we had about a 10,000 square foot facility. And so for 9 years, we ran brick and mortar locations and just integrated that in one place. But, somewhere in the middle of that journey, it started becoming very apparent to me that there's this predictable human nature puzzle. Humans can be messy and they have feelings and they have fluctuations in their emotions and they have mental and emotional blocks from obvious things that this isn't rational anymore, but you're really stuck here. And so that really, I interestingly, before I even got into health, I had just graduated from seminary and had a kind of a pastor's or minister's heart behind trying to help people. And so it kind of came full circle back to I've got to address these thought barriers. There's limiting beliefs, and then there's poisonous beliefs. There's things that we do in our thinking that really keep us stuck. And once I figured out that I have got to address the whole person, so we ended up creating a coaching business called True Whole Human, really to try to address the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual in an integrated way. And it's been a long, circuitous journey. I don't have any idea how to tell anyone to get into exactly what I do, but here we are. And I get to coach people on the regular, walking through and really triaging what is the heart of the matter here. And because I've been doing it so long, I've gotten pretty surgical at getting to the heart of the matter. And sometimes it's the upstream mental, emotional toxicity that's poisoning the body. And sometimes it's the body that needs a break. It's a stress that needs to be offloaded. And then we have the fortitude to face some of the traumas and glitches we all have in life. But yeah, so it's an integrated approach to a lot of different things, but that's, I guess, a fairly short version of my about 20-year story.
wow. Yeah, I love that because I think with addiction, whether you're a family member or the person going through addiction, I don't think people realize until they go through it that this work actually starts once they're clean or sober.
Mm.
When those thoughts, the feelings come back, once the pains of body have been masked for so long, they appear. and everything that's going on under the surface, then you've really got to deal with it. So I think that's brilliant that you're bringing everything together because one gentleman I knew, he got sober and then he had to have his bunions
Mm,
treated, and such a painful operation. And he was in such a quandary because he didn't know whether to take the medication or not because he was in so much fear that he would then be addicted to that pain medication. Through
mm.
everything that we're told, don't take anything that's mind altering or could cause dependence. So a lot of it was his thought process.
Yeah, and once you realize how profoundly your thoughts influence your physiology, it does give you ability to step back and pause that. And there's so many different studies that demonstrate the power of the mind, and the medical world just they always attempt to account for what they call the placebo effect. But yeah, it's amazing. There's been multiple studies where they give people one half of the group gets a real knee surgery and the other half gets a fake knee surgery. And often the people with the fake knee surgery feel better the most. And so there's so many things like that. You rub something like poison ivy on one arm and aloe on the other, but you tell them it was the opposite of what you did, and they'll manifest symptoms based on what they think is happening, not based on what really happened. So, yeah, I'm understanding the thoughts and how they impact the physiology, and that sometimes it's not just that we have to try to or avoid the downside of it. We can leverage the upside and realize that our mind has a powerful healing capability. And in the case like what you're talking about with the medication, you can maybe use your mind to help you overcome whatever side effects you might be experiencing, or um, give your body other tools of healing so that you can, if there is a need to intervene and just get somebody out of pain, that doesn't have to be a slippery slope if you have the support around them to help them um, get back on solid ground and heal more holistically.
Yeah, 'cause they talk about a lot in recovery having to do mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation and these sort of exercises. And many people don't understand why. They're just sort of told you've got to be in the here and now and forget about the world going on. But I know for me, I always need answers of why I'm doing something. I'm terrible like
Sure.
that. So I just
Yeah.
need to know why it's going to benefit me and how it can help. So, what are those benefits of quieting the mind, those relaxation times?
Well, when it comes to the mind, it's an endless set of doors you can go down. But the simplest frame I have to help people get into what the heart of the matter is, to find the inner peace, to find whether it's your craving for intellectual underpinnings that say, "Oh, now I know why I'm doing this," or whether it's just going through the past and making sense of your stories. Because essentially, what you pointed out in your comments there was when I'm not as inclined to just blindly trust the process. I want to know something. So you want an ability to fill gaps. You want a narrative framework that makes sense of what you have lived. And there's this deep-seated craving every human has for understanding, whether that's understanding ourselves or understanding other people or the world and our place in it or where this world came from. We are insatiably curious creatures. And where we don't have answers, we inevitably fill gaps with whatever story we have that makes sense to us. And often we get our stories wildly wrong, or we misinterpret information and we tell ourselves a really crappy story. And that story starts to limit our options. It starts to limit our self-image, or it poisons our self-image, or it paints other people in an us them, or it can be victimhood, or it can be shame, or it can be guilt, or it can be any number of arresting emotions. So part of, I guess, the short version of my comment here is to understand, or to find peace. Some of it has to come back to a simple question: what is the story I'm telling myself? And you could follow that one up with, is that even true? Or more nuanced, can I even prove that that's true? And often we can't. And it is the invitation of saying, what story am I telling myself, that says, could I tell myself a better story? Since I can't prove that, what other options might be on the table now? And it's humbling, but it's not judgmental when you do that. Because now, wait, heck, my identity's not on the line. I'm not a stupid person if I misperceived something. I didn't know. And ignorance isn't a sin. It's lack of knowing something. Well, that's fixable, but some of it to find new ways out of the some of the loops we're talking about, it has to come back to, can I tell myself a better, truer, believable story? And who can I find to mirror back the story I'm telling myself and allow them to ask me questions that maybe point out some of my, I guess, problem blindness, if you want to think of it that way, where you don't recognize you're stuck in a swirly, anxious loop or a self-identity, you know, sinkhole, if you will, where you're telling yourself a story that's poisoning your outcome, or it's short-circuiting your will to try, or it's straining your other relationships. And there's a great, probably the classic work, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie talks about the idea that everyone goes through the world constantly thinking they're right. And if we just kind of do the basic math on that, it's impossible that all of us are right all of the time. So what it can introduce is a kind question. I wonder where I'm missing it. I wonder where I may have misperceived something. And what it takes is humility, but it takes a sturdy enough self-image to say, it's okay if I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that's the end of the show. The story's not done being written yet. Maybe I'm living by a rule from when I was 5 or 8 or 10 that served an 8-year-old, but doesn't serve me today. And what would it mean to not continue to live by an old rule that isn't necessarily one that's serving me now? So there you have some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we do that, don't we? A lot of things are ingrained in us as children, and we do.
Hmm.
I don't want to say don't think for ourselves, but we just take it for granted that that's the right way and that's the way it should be done. And
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a shock to the system when we learn there is a different way of doing things,
Hmm.
and sometimes a lot easier way as well.
Right. Yeah. No, we often just because of our storytelling put ourselves in a rut of interpreting the world, of just a judgment about who we are. Some of the most profound, I guess I'll call them poisonous beliefs that I've found in people are stories of inadequacy, which I just this, different versions of saying I don't have what it takes, I'm not enough, I'll never measure up, or I'm not worthy. Even if I could measure up, I'm still not. Who am I to? I'm not worth the effort. And those types of wounds, the last one is a lack of purpose, which is a kind of a different animal, but they're not mutually exclusive. Somebody could have all three of them or two of them. But what those stories do is they keep us from believing that it's worth the effort, or because I tell myself an inadequacy story, therefore I'm not going to try. And if you go and examine the roots of where that story came from, and you can almost like step out of it like it didn't happen to you and look at it like objectively, like that was something done to you. That wasn't because you were defective. And that difference, it's a whole other set of things that can unearth when we're trying to heal. But when you recognize that, wait a minute, I may have worth, and my worth may have nothing to do with how many things I can check off of a list to prove that I'm good enough. Maybe my worth is intrinsic, and I was made by the creator of the universe who said I was worth it, and such that he hatched a rescue mission and an ongoing effort to continue to interact with us and never gives up on wooing us back into relationship. That's his judgment of who we are, and that's where our worth is found. And if we can ground it in something like that, then worth is no longer in question. And adequacy is just a question of I'm adequate to try. And I, of course, I don't have every skill, and I haven't maxed out every virtue, and I haven't learned every language and been to every country, and like, but I'm adequate to try to do something. And so let me start with where I am, humbly admitting that I don't know everything and that there's so much more to learn. And that doesn't have to be threatening. That can be exciting because now there's
Mm.
so many different more ways to win this. Now there's so many different ways I can choose to set out on a course to have adventures and see what I can learn. I can start to stack skills, and it gives us a way back out of this frame of, yeah, but I'm afraid. And what would people say? And yeah, of course, people are going to say what they say, but that doesn't mean you have to stop trying. And if we can stop medicating ourselves against the fear, whether that can be books, that can be porn, that can be food, that can be any number of ways that medication, the things that we do to cope, if we can just say, I want to feel these feels so I can get past them. I want to have somebody help me tell better stories. And I want to focus on this question of purpose and mission and what I'm here to do and start to get back in the frame of adventure. Life starts to get kind again. And it's fun to be alive, and you see your time as a gift and it's precious, and your skills as something you were gifted with, and you can go do something with it rather than, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with myself, and I'm what are people going to say, and I'm too afraid if I try, and that doesn't need to be part of it, but it can take a while to dig that out and to get to an understanding of what's really been driving my behavior. Where have I been emotionally starved of some of the basic needs, the basic longings that all humans have? And where are my actions a response to that emotional starvation? Once you can start to inventory what's and have a sense of what's really driving you, and sometimes that does take people who can help you see it. But there's plenty of books and mentors, and there's all sorts of podcasts like this you can listen to that help you find some of those clues. But yeah, once you get an understanding of your what's driving your behavior, to me, that's such a key to being able to observe it, analyze it, step back, and then kindly choose a different course.
Yeah, definitely. I think talking is such a massive part of that.
Hmm.
Just being able to find somebody that you trust to open up to, somebody you feel comfortable with, and things can look different from just saying things out loud.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I was just sort of thinking how it all comes together because I've been doing a lot of training around trauma and the effects on the body and inflammation from
Hmm.
trauma.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is how it all comes together for you and what you do, I suppose. And I didn't realize how much trauma can really, really affect the body. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I've got aches and pains everywhere, but I would never have put it down to trauma. And from my learnings, I'm thinking I've got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, we all do because nobody gets a free pass from struggle in this life, right? It's part of the human experience. And what we don't understand or what some of the military people are often the worst at this because they are not because they're stupid, ignorant, bad people, just because their profession teaches them that now's not the time to be emotional. That now, like this hard thing you're going through, stuff it because bullets are flying, stuff it because there's a mission here. And we'll get to your feelings later. And they're taught to just some of the things they experience are so traumatic, and the wiring, for good reason, is yeah, we're in the trenches. Now's not the time to talk about how this makes you feel. We can get past, we can talk about that later, but it's just a trained stuff your emotion, whether it's military or anybody. That um, a tendency we have to stuff our emotions because I don't want to be a burden to somebody else or this, I want to man up. And what does it say about my image if I don't stuff this and soldier on? And literally, what we're doing when we stuff our emotions is we're taking something that should have come out of us and been processed, whether that's verbally or with tears or with heck, the shakes. Like some of the World War I soldiers, they had these ticks and these shakes that would just come over them because they didn't had not processed the trauma they were experiencing. So if we don't stuff or if we don't let it out, it literally tucks itself back in our tissue somewhere. And there are people you'll find who have really tender parts of their body. Like that just there's no logical reason for it, but in some ways their tissue has restored that trauma, and they can. I've listened to a fascinating story once of two doctors talking, and one of them had expressed he had years and years of back pain, and his back pain strangely went away when his dad died and he watched his dad be put into the kiln to be cremated. Like as he was watching that, he just felt his back pain release. There was some processing of emotion and story he was subconsciously doing that said it's okay to let go of that now. And so it's one of countless pieces of evidence or stories you find where this sometimes our language betrays us. Like I got this pit in my stomach. I feel like I got the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm having a hard time taking a deep breath. Those are emotional statements usually. Sometimes you got a parasite infection, but a lot of the times it's an emotional feeling that's triggering a physical response. And any of us can feel that the loop of stress. We know that doesn't physically feel good. We know what it's like to be sleepless from stress. And so much of that is thought generated. And when we can recognize it, the scriptures say, take your thoughts captive and make them obedient. And so there's a two-part admonition. It's like you have to recognize what the thoughts are that are keeping you up at night or the thoughts that are making you fearful. And it's arresting the anxiousness to say, hang on, I want to understand this. And once you can have some level of, oh, that's the story I'm telling myself. That's the fear I'm wrestling with. That's what's keeping me up at night, or the anxious thing I'm projecting onto the future that may or may not happen. Once you have it captured, then it can be analyzed. And if you can do it kindly and just say, how long have I been feeling this way? What is it that's keeping this going? And what thought would help me come to peace with what has been or not be so anxious about what I can't control anyway? There are good answers to those questions, but first it starts with questions. So it's taking them captive and then it's forging them into truth. It's making them obedient to a better story and say you don't get to be the boss of me anymore. And an analogy I often use is this idea of there's kind of these two voices. There's more than two probably, but there's two main voices in our head when it comes to our past or our options. And there's this, I call it a prosecuting attorney, and there's a defense attorney. And I find in most people, the prosecuting attorney is much more muscular. It's much more developed. It's had the longer run, and it's kind of a bully in the courtroom of the mind. And it brings up all of these accusations and stories and fears, and it just drops them on the table. Like, what are you going to do about that? And the defense attorney is a little pipsqueak who doesn't know how to stand up for you and defend something and rhetorically ask other fair questions in return. And when the prosecutor and the defense attorney both become peers, and the prosecutor can throw out reasons to be concerned or evidence of shortcomings, and the defense attorney can say, okay, that's fair, but what were you expecting me to do in that moment? I can't be two places at once, or I don't know everything, or should I never try anything? And start to ask good defensive questions, not defensive like I'm stubborn, but defensive as in I can defend myself without being defensive. I can honestly look at this and say, okay, if I've got a shortcoming, I can work on that. But I'm also trying and I'm doing the best I can. And if you have a fair thing to say, Mr. Prosecutor, please bring that to the table. But if you're just here to throw stones, go pound sand. I'm not here to just sit there under your judgment with no recourse or with no rebuttal that says, hang on, you're being mean and there's no nuance in your accusations. You just like beating me down. And it's like an old friend that we're so familiar with that keeps us playing small. And if that defense attorney can grow a spine and ask some fair questions and learn to stand in the reality that you're not perfect. So let's throw that silly standard out, but you're never going to be. But so let's at least try here and let's find something fair. What that does to these stuffed emotions we're talking about is it brings in this gift called understanding. It brings in this windfall of like hope or the potential to change, or that things don't have to be that way. And boy, does that do a number on releasing some of this toxic emotion that we're talking about as a precursor sometimes to the physical healing we're all craving.
Yeah, and getting out of survival mode. Yeah, completely having that time and giving yourself a break. But I love that analogy because I love my trials. I watch them all the time. That's my new addiction.
Yeah.
So I've got to watch that. So yeah, no, that's really interesting that bringing it all together. What would you say to somebody who, because that's who I work with, people in recovery that are
Hmm.
stuck, um, or an addiction, but they feel stuck. They're not living their life. They're not experiencing it. They're just existing because they're thinking they've got to go to meetings every day to heal. They've got to do this. They've got to do that. And they're not giving themselves a break. They're
Hmm.
just living on autopilot to do the things that they're told to do in recovery and not experiencing life.
Hmm.
Um, I think taking it right back and just working on yourself and giving yourself a break. I'm sure it starts there, that bit of self-care.
Yeah, well, there's no path to a well-rounded, fulfilling life that doesn't involve self-care. And what a lot of people end up doing, especially moms, are kind of the worst at this for good reason, but their needs always come last. And I'll take care of everyone else. And if there happens to be a few spare minutes somewhere else, I'll take care of myself. Or now I feel bad about doing that because my kids are more important than me or whatever, the story they're telling themselves. And so, yes, I don't, there's trauma is a funny thing because it's less predictable or it's less able to be scripted, like a parasite cleanse, a heavy metal cleanse, a rebooting your gut, healing different parts of your body. Those are easier on the physiological level than trauma because it can ping pong and it can be tied. One belief you have or one poisonous thought can be tied into 10 or 12 or a dozen different stories, and those stories they're like vines that grew off of one tree trunk, and you have to prune them off because there's still truth here, but we have to get the lies off. And until we have found to me, the deepest story, the deepest wound, the existential fear. And to me, it's still those three. It's unworthiness, inadequacy, or lack of purpose. Any of those three will typically be the deep fear that we have. And lack of unworthiness means I don't belong anywhere. Nobody will love me. And those kinds of feelings, they need a place to hit solid ground and go, wait a minute, that's not true. So sometimes, and I guess to answer your question, my way into helping people find that is almost exclusively through questions. And I find that most people intrinsically know the answer when they're zinged with the right questions. So I bring a lot more questions to the table than I ever do answers. But questions create frames. They create an option. And often when you're zinged with the question, you're like, yeah, you just nailed it. That's what I've been dealing with. And it wasn't particularly magical. It's that human nature is predictable. And one of the things I've identified, we all have these 12, there's at least, and maybe there's more, but 12 predictable longings. I've never shown these to anybody where they go, no, I don't want any of that. Like everybody goes, yeah, that I long for all of that. And to have an awareness of your core wound, whatever that story is, or that set of them, and then to say, here's the different longings every human has. And maybe you've been starved your whole life for validation. Maybe you've been starved your whole life for significance, or you feel like your dignity is on the line. Or maybe you've been starved for adventure or for romance, or you've been starved for any number of longings that are good and appropriate. And in an effort to meet them, you've shifted to try to find the closest proxy that you can to meet that. And you just need somebody to ask you the question to help you go, that's what I'm really craving. I'm craving belonging. I'm craving becoming, like meaning knowing my life is going somewhere and that what I'm doing is actually working. I need some sort of evidence that I'm going to be worth it. Otherwise, the only thing I feel like I do is, to your point, I exist to go back to this meeting and tell my story, and I'm in this loop, and I haven't actually understood what's driving my behavior or what it would look like to find a way out of it. And if you don't come across the questions that create an awareness of the options, yeah, you do stay stuck. So anyway, it's fun work, and it's something I didn't envision myself getting into when I started more in the physical health realm, but it really is. It's often the emotional upstream blockage that keeps the physical body from being able to respond.
Wouldn't it be lovely if we could put doctors out of business? Because
Some of
people
them, yes.
open up. Yeah, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Not all of
There are
them.
plenty more, most of them, I would say. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the medical world could just go away. It's only muddying the waters and making this worse.
Yeah, that's it. And I know we briefly mentioned like throwing painkillers and things. It's just another mask,
Yeah.
another reason to numb the feelings and not get to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I think, yes, start with just looking after yourself and talking, just
Yeah.
releasing what you're carrying can really
Well, and
help.
to your point, part of what tempers our ability to do that is the medication. So we'll take pain and then we'll take psych med. So pain medications, they cover up the problem. Your body's shouting at you that something hurts as feedback to say, can you help me with this? Whatever we're doing is creating this pain. Can we do something different? And basically just unplug the microphone when you take a painkiller. Like you're desensitizing your body's ability to communicate with you. And of course, it's only going to get worse because you haven't dealt with where the pain's coming from in the first place. And that physical pain can't give you the signal. And so it's corrosive. You just rot more in that. Your body gets less and less healthy because it can't give you the feedback. Say, that hurts, this feels fine. Just do more of that and not so much of this. And that comes back to the habits we choose or the foods we ingest or the water we drink or the thoughts we think. But when we take the pain out of the equation, what we've taken from ourselves is the main impetus for change, because it's one of two things that creates change in the human. It's inspiration, which is way more fun to work from, and it's desperation. Most of the change people have when it comes to their health or when it comes to life is desperation. They have to wait for it to get really bad where it's disgusting. It's I can't handle it anymore, that it's this painful, and I'll finally change. But when we take away the stimulus of change, we rob ourselves of the information we needed or the nudge we needed to say, I have to change my ways. And worse than that, I think, is the psychiatry industry. So you mentioned earlier, I'm not afraid to throw the medical system under the bus. Well, here we go. So that industry, if you could, one of the best books is called The Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker, but it just lays bare the entire history of the psychiatry industry and their longing to be doctors equal with medical doctors. And so they needed some sort of scientific thing. So they came up with these stupid psych meds that basically the summary of his book is they're almost exclusively, like, let's think 99% harmful. It's disgustingly biased science pretending to be scientific, and there's not even a blood test, there's no lab test for psych conditions. It's an amorphous collection of symptoms based on a questionnaire. It sounds kind of like this. And so we've got these different medications we can put into you to make you stop feeling something that your body was trying to communicate. It can numb out an emotion. And years ago, probably 10 years ago, I had a client who was on psych meds, and she was 100 pounds overweight, mom, married, two kids, and her want to was broken. She literally did not care that she was fat. She couldn't win the
Mm,
argument that this was a good example for her kids. She couldn't win the argument that her husband liked that or that it would be good for her long-term health. So she lost the rational argument, but just didn't, there was no want to that was left. And when you break someone's want to, when you take away what pain has to teach us, the resilience that can be forged when we have to do hard things and wrestle with strong emotion, you take away the impetus for real change. If you like, there's a difference between, you know, in the depths of despair and fired up and ready to take on the world. What medications do? They typically put people in the middle as numb and not sad. And
mm.
numb and not sad it's a hard, you don't have much to sink your teeth into. You just kind of exist. And so the other egregious thing about those meds is they're ridiculously hard to get off of. And people become so dependent on them and they don't know how to handle. They have no sounding board, safe place to go work through the detox or the coming off of those types of things, that they're just kind of stuck. And the pharmaceutical companies have won because they've created a customer for life. And they've numbed you out and turned you into somebody who's just going to play small forever. And part of the antidote is weaning off of that stimulant so that you can then, or suppression, and so you can go feel again and you can live a life and you can wrestle with these messy things you have stuffed for a long time, and start to identify the stories that created the openness to even try that intervention in the first place, and go on what can be an extended healing journey. It doesn't have to be 5 years. It can be a shorter weeks and months worth of work. But one of my more extreme stories, I had a client many years ago he was from India, and he had been on psych meds for a long time, and he had tried to get off. And every time he tried, he got loony and crazy, and he just felt like he had to go back on them. So he finally was so fed up with this dependency and the way it was just blunting his life and his will to try anything. He decided to stop training with me. He went back to India to live with his family so he could just go off these medications and be surrounded by people who loved him, so he could go through the ugly, uncomfortable detox with people that weren't going to reject him, and they would just be there through the ups and downs of him going a little crazy, so his body could finally reset to having his feelings back and to having drive back. And so that's part of the disservice that we do, is we've told people it's inappropriate to feel hard things, and so you don't have to feel anything bad. And we've taken away the stimulus that nudges us to change, but we've also taken away the opportunity to have evidence that we can overcome. And if we
Yeah.
don't ever have that evidence in life, then we're fearful of everything because I think the next thing's just going to break me. No, but there's a great book I just read this year called Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. And if
Oh,
your listeners have not read that, oh my gosh, it's so good. It helped open me up to the category that I used to think of therapy as kind of like totally useless to somewhere really helpful. And now I've expanded that to the left. Now it's egregiously harmful and weaponized to useless to helpful. And she makes a very compelling case that so much of the therapy that we have and the numbed out medicated generation we have now is it wasn't just, bummer that didn't work out. It's intentional. And there's an ugly, we have a generation of snowflakes who can't go to an interview without mom and dad there. And they have this idea that nothing should ever be wrong anytime. And if I have a bad feeling, then I need to run from it and suppress it and get away. And everybody else is the problem. It's never me. It's in this therapy world has created victims and
Yeah.
entitlement and nobody that takes ownership. You're not perfect either. Back to my comments on Dale Carnegie, like there's a chance you might have contributed to some of the tension or you could be a participant in the way out of this. And now instead of it, we strain relationships and push people away when what we really crave is belonging. And now we're in a different pickle. So anyway, I hate with a lot there. So you feel free to comment on any of this.
Yeah. No, but loads. There's this like sabotage and um what was I going to ask? It's completely gone. But I think that talking about the body,
Hmm.
we our body tells us everything, doesn't it? From how we're feeling, where there's pain, when we need to eat, when we need to sleep.
Yeah.
It's just a complete messenger to keep us safe. And
Hmm.
we are just using the wrong methods
Yeah.
to heal what the body needs.
Yeah.
Or that makes complete sense to me. And I'm just thinking while you were talking, if we could just open up, if we could look at things before they go too far, there wouldn't be addiction like there is today. There wouldn't be these massive pharmaceutical companies. There wouldn't,
Hmm.
if we listen to what our bodies are naturally telling us. And we all at some point have just masked it because we just don't want to feel, whether it's feelings or pain. And ultimately, we have to go through that painful period to come out the other side stronger.
Yeah. No, we do. And it's not that I don't want to paint it as if you have two options. You medicate yourself into oblivion, or you just sign up and brace the suck and let the train run over you and then back up over you. And it's there's only so much stress or trauma or change any one person can handle at a time. And so part of the way I've been able to be helpful is like, let's get strategic here. We can't eat the whole elephant in one bite. We're not going to solve all the problems today. I'm not going to flip a switch and you're going to do these three things and be healthy tomorrow. So there's a process we go through and let's figure out one where you're motivated to change. Let's figure out where your storytelling is poisoning you. And let's figure out where your health habits are not serving you. And let's pick a few measurable, simple things that we can work on relative to you. Let's track something so we have some actionable information here. And let's find our way through this over time rather than just say, hey, embrace the sucker, and lean into that. It's going to stink, but rip the band-aid off. Like, yeah, maybe. Sometimes that works, but most of the time especially the more traumatized someone is, there's a gentler window of time and questions and get them sturdy somewhere and give them a few wins and
Yeah.
create the psychologically safe space where they can just be real. And I don't feel like, I don't know, I'm frustrated or it's taking longer than I thought or whatever those. Now I'm worried about what my dad's going to think or my spouse or my kids or whatever. Like we all have those fears that don't get to come to the surface much because we just push them down. And once you're able to recognize, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm avoiding. I'm stressing. And I'm telling myself a really crappy story like my body's fighting me. No, it's not. Your body's your ally. It's been your ally your whole life. No matter what you've done to it, it's still here. It has not quit. Maybe has some scars and letting you know, like, oh my gosh, I got different things going on. And I sure like you to help me out here. But it's your ally. And when you start to frame it that way, you can be kind to it. Now you're the steward of it. Now you can treat it like you're a master gardener tending a garden that needs some TLC and time. And you can't plant every seed and harvest all of it all at once. So let's develop a process. Let's develop a method. Let's think about your story in stages and who you aspire to be, or when you are on your best level headed, that would be really cool. Maybe sometimes I find people have a hard time with the question of purpose. And so we kind of back into it by stringing together some wins and they go, how about that? I can do things like, and I wonder if I could do that. And once you understand human nature and once you understand human physiology, my goodness, is it easier to get people well. It could still be a winding journey. It's never straight up and to the right. There's two steps forward and a step back and on and on. But that's life. You're going to have your occasional flat tire that's emotional or that's real. You're going to have disappointments in your future. And if you're trying to arrange a life where you can just skip disappointment, I'm sorry, I have to tell you, that's not a real life. It's going to be. Okay. But Jim Rohn said it well. He said the winds of opportunity and the winds of difficulty are always here. They blow at different intensities, but they're always here. That mix, the ratio of opportunity and difficulty shifts from time to time, but it's always both. And part
Yeah.
of life is just learning to set a better sail to tack with and go through the difficult things so that you don't let them become a crappy story that sets you back and living life from a place of fear. And yeah, so anyway, there's a lot more to consider.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I'm thinking as well with respect to you sort of touched on it briefly, I think. I always advise people don't give everything up at once.
Yeah.
It can be too overwhelming because they think,
Hmm.
well, if I'm giving up drinking, I'm going to give up smoking. I'm going to work with a guy, and he gave up. His marriage had ended, so he gave up alcohol, porn, red meat, dairy,
Oof.
you name it. He gave it,
Yeah.
and I thought this. It
It's
didn't sit right
shocking to the
with me.
system. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he's either gone away and become some monk, like, or I don't know how the body could cope with that because
Yeah.
alcohol was enough for me.
Yeah. No, if you try to go too aggressive too fast, that can be so shocking to your system, emotional system or biological system, which aren't separate. But if you can have a more of a measure, what of these am I most interested to change? Which of these do I think I could get some victory in first? And um, yeah, sometimes like for the body, you got to get the diet and the gut working. If you get those two things going, then a lot of other systems can come online. And if you can um, really arrest the storytelling, then it's easier to, oh, here's that trigger again. Okay, this is part biological, but I have a craving, I have a longing for cigarettes, alcohol, porn, whatever. What other options do I have? What that it's I'm trying to that there's this deep brain groove, this rut I'm used to. How do I fire the circuits to get myself in a different groove? How do I pause that moment? You get according to fMRI machines, you get about a half second when you get a rush of emotion before your thinking circuits really start to back off. I'm like, well, I guess we're just going to do whatever he wants now. And it's that little half second, but you need to think of that preemptively. Like, okay, here it is again. I don't have to hang. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling craving. I'm feeling unseen, overlooked, whatever. What's a healthy response to this? If you can allow yourself that little pause in that moment, you can. It doesn't mean you're going to nail it every time, but that starts those circuits start to light up with more frequency, and you can like, no, I hear you, I get it. I'm gonna, but that's not for now. Maybe we'll do that in 10 minutes, but not now. And you're just pushing it away farther enough where you get some space from it, and that maybe that's the phone call you make. Maybe that's the whatever other accountability system you have that helps you. Nope, that's not it. And sometimes there is a cold turkey. Like get rid of your TV. No, get a dumb phone. Like there are nuclear options we can entertain like those. Like not having a television. Like oh, I never thought of that. A
Yeah,
dumb phone, so I can't like yeah. If you really want to change, make a big decision and stick with it, and then feel the feels of what it's like to not have that crutch as you
yeah,
go through a change process.
that's amazing. I think that's great. And just pulling all that together, tell me how you work with people, how people can find you, and I just love what you do. I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. I did most of the talking, so hopefully I'll let you get enough words in here. Yeah, so yeah, if people want to find me, they can go to healingunited.today. So healingunited.today instead of .com. We wanted a sense of urgency with our URL. So go to
Like it.
healingunited.today, and we have three different detox programs we take people through. There's just an accelerated physical detox. There's a mind and body cleanse. and then there's a year-long program. So basically what we do to get started with somebody is we just ask them to, there's an application, there's a schedule a consultation button. It's a free 45-minute call. They can just click on that, answer a few questions, and then just it's more of a collaborative conversation to say, where are you and what might be the most helpful path out of this? And are we the best fit to help you with it? So we just go through that and then we kind of mutually decide which of these options would be best for where you are. So if you remember nothing else and something I said resonated and you want to talk, just go schedule a free 45-minute consultation on our website, and we'd be happy to talk with you and see if we can be helpful.
Amazing. And I'm just thinking with you saying that, are there a lot of people that come to you with something in mind and it just goes in a completely new direction?
Yeah, well, sometimes it literally is, and it's not a fault of the person. It's just problem blindness. They don't know what they don't know. They didn't have a category that, wait, I could work on my emotions and mind and relationship skills before I get to a detox. Yeah, we could. That may for some people that's more appropriate. Like, because if you're going to stay stuck in this I'm not good enough loop, and the first time you miss swallowing a supplement or eating the sugar, you're like, oh my God, it's horrible. I knew it, I couldn't do it, and you're like, hang on, that's another crappy story. That doesn't mean you have to eat the next cookie. Like, just back on the
Yeah.
horse here. And so sometimes we just need to have a little more awareness of what a realistic transformation journey looks like. And some of my long-term clients have had major things to overcome. Have been with me 3, 4, or 5 years. And so, somebody had over 500 pounds on his body and 13 medications and raging diabetes and all sorts. Like, okay, I'm probably not going to fix that in 8 weeks. So let's talk about a more realistic time frame for healing. And yeah, and so we that conversation is fun because it can go so many different places. And I learn things when I do it. It's fun for me to do those as well.
That's amazing. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And
Well,
you've made
thank
my
you.
day today. You have really made my day. It's just really nice to hear. And yeah, I've got all these hopes now of people listening and just not getting to that point where they need to go to the doctors. If they come
Mhm.
and see you and just express everything and they'll just feel so much better
Yeah.
without
Well,
that
and it's
need for that intervention.
right. Well, and if it's any comfort to some of them, I also work with other coaches and doctors. So it's not just me, and we have a team. And if you come into something where we need a doctor to weigh in, we have one. But most of the time, but what's beautiful about our paradigm is that we are in a healing paradigm, not a treatment paradigm. Treatment says there's something wrong with you. Your body's not smart enough to fix this, so we need to intervene and force it to do what we think is best for it, which we think is hubris. We think that's talk about arrogant. Like, you know better than the body how to fix all this. Our paradigm is healing. The body knows what to do. We have a lot to process, but we want to help take away any burden we can from your biology or your mind. And we want to empower your body with as many health habits or as many perspectives as possible so that it can do what only it can do. The body's the only one that knows where all the bodies are buried, where all the gum on the seats is, where all the toxins in the cells are. It's the only thing that knows where that is. Well, let's let the body do its work. We just get to be stewards and teachers and help get out of the way, help you get out of your own way. So anyway, it's fun work. So if that resonates with anybody, check us out, healingunited.today.
Christian, you're a superstar. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your kind words.